Hello everyone! Well, after talking about the specials and the sell opens, it is time to cover the hardest part to do content-wise, which is ranking every single main weapon. Today, we're going to be starting with the worst part. We're going to be talking about the low and bottom tiers of Splatoon 3, the weakest weapons in the game, and try to explain why they're there. If it's your main, play it if you like it, have fun. That's what the game is. It's just my opinion. Subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get started. So, for this first tier, these are going to be some weapons that theoretically could be higher on a standard tier list, but I wanted to make a separate spot for weapons that I feel really don't have a reason to be picked. Any reason that you might have to pick one of these weapons is often better picked on other weapons, and I'll try to briefly explain that. First up, Vanilla Carbon Roller. If you want a close-range carbon weapon, Carbon Deco is in the game. It has a burst bomb for much more reliable damage combos, and a much better kit overall. Auto bomb doesn't do too much for it, and there's plenty of other Zipcaster weapons to which you could use the special. Similarly, the only thing Clash Blaster has is its giant area of effect radius size, as its kill time is horrible, damage per second is horrible, etc. And now 92 Blast is in the game with the exact same kill time and the same radius, with a one-shot direct and only 2 shots to kill, making it much better in most situations. On top of that, Splat Bomb and Trizuka are both options you can easily find on other weapons. Luna is most directly comparable with Octobrush as a short-range Zipcaster option, and while it does have a similar bomb, Octobrush as a main weapon has a lot more strengths to be used over this, and I think as a whole, it definitely outclasses it in terms of the weapon kit. There is really no reason to pick the Vanilla Charger. If you want a Vacuum, there are better options for it, and if you want a Charger, this thing has the Zekofin kit. Vacuum right now is the worst special in the game, like I've talked about with my specials tier list, and therefore there's no real reason to nerf your weapon kit this hard when the Zekofin kit is quite strong on this thing. I'll just put both Brellas here and talk about them at the same time, but yeah, these Brellas do pretty much no damage. If you can't really do damage to people, you can't really threaten people. And Brellas need to be threatening because they have a ton of downtime. They have a shield that has to be utilized, and to have that shield have pressure, they have to be threatening to actually get kills, which they aren't. On top of that, both these weapons have awful kits. Tri-Strike on the normal Brella completely takes you out of your ability to shield, so you can't use it like an ink tank refill like you could with either of the Brellas in Splatoon 2, and Reef Slider is a Reef Slider. It kind of works okay on stuff like Tetra and 92 that have things they can do out of it, and this weapon does not. Yeah, both the pros can go here. Forge Pro is definitely way better, don't get me wrong, but yeah, I mean, Pro is a Pro. It just doesn't really do much. I've made an entire video on this weapon, and that video has not really changed. Despite all of Sloshing Machine's nerfs, it's honestly still just comparable in terms of its Booyah Bomb output and similar bomb, and it's just such a worse main weapon that you might as well be taking the machine for it. If Forge was 190p, I cannot begin to tell you how much higher it could be on this list for having a shooter that could get Booyah Bomb more reliably, but Pro's terrible paint, mediocre ink efficiency, and 210p, again, this weapon is 210p, means I don't think there's actually a reason to pick this weapon. 96 and V-Jet are both very similar in which that they are mid-range shooter ink vacuum options, both of which have terrible sub-weapons, so there's not really much point to it. Again, Vacuum's not really a special you want to invest in already, and both of these weapon kits have different options if you want the main gun, and there is no reason to really want a Sprinkler or a Line Marker in your comp right now. So, I've come to a realization that makes Sploosh even sadder than it already is, which is not only are the weapon kits mediocre for a main, but both of these kits actually are pretty much directly competing with Splatana Wiper. The Vanilla Wiper has Torpedo instead of Curling Bomb being much better, and is a mobile main weapon that centralizes in killing and taking attention with an Ultra Stamp, except Wiper works better with it. And Neo Sploosh has Beacon and Whale, while Wiper has Beacon and Missile, which is just straight up a better version of the kit that works better on the weapon. Sploosh is definitely a main weapon with potential due to its fast speed, kill time, and solid paint output along with special output. However, both its kits being just worse Wipers is kind of unfortunate. It's okay guys, Sploosh 7 they've always given a good kit. I'm sure when that happens in a year from now, Sploosh will finally be able to be a weapon in this game. Clash Neo is pretty much the same thing. There are better chump options, except in this case you don't even have the lethal bomb because you have curling, which is just whatever. We have the Dapple Nouveau, which competes too hard with Tetra for the same niche. It does do a little bit of extra damage, but that's definitely not worth all the trade-off that Tetra has being able to move and shoot at the same time, as well as having 4 dodge rolls. Big Swig now has an alternate kit in the game, which means there's no reason to use the kit with a wall and vacuum. If you want to play a Swig, especially in zones where you commonly pick it in, you have a kit with Inkstorm, which is very, very good on zones, so there is no reason to pick this one. Vanilla L3 is a mediocre main weapon. In theory, it has a bit more painting range than Splash, and that could kind of be useful and maybe kind of more mid-range, but it can't really play to those, and it also has a curling, so Splash doesn't really have a problem being more mid-range when it can throw burst bombs, and this thing has no sub. Its real only argument for success is crab spam, and that is not something the Splash-O-Matic is bad at, so it can just do that too. The only good part about H3's Tacticooler is the fact that it can spam it, but guess what? So can NZAP, and that has a bomb and a significantly better main weapon, and if you really want to play H3, there is the H3D in the game, so yeah. So from here, we move on to F tier with weapons that actually have a reason to be picked, just not a very good one with way more flaws to compensate for the strengths. And let's start with Gootuber. This weapon used to be played a little bit at the start of the game because it had Torpedo, which was very useful to have with missiles to be able to throw bombs while you spam 10 missiles. But ever since the missile cooldown nerf, you need your main weapon to actually be able to do things while the missiles are going off. Gootuber does not do that. It has one of the worst main weapons in the entire game. It takes forever to actually charge up, its gimmick is nearly useless, and it just takes forever to really do anything. And on top of that, it's just kind of whatever compared to other missile options that can do similar things. The only reason it's not in Z tier is because it is a charger with missiles, and you could argue that having the threat of a one-shot charger could maybe be worth it sometimes.
So originally I had Pencil a bit lower in this list, but this is gonna have to be talked about another time, as in this is actually made it out of the low tier section of the video, so you'll see tomorrow what's happening with that.
Blob's real only thing over Explo is lingering shots and damage per second, neither of which are super worth it, but I could definitely maybe see some one-tricks pushing it, maybe. Like, I guess it does have some unique things you can do with the one-shot and the blobs lingering around, but in general, the high movement capabilities just made it not really that much of a problem, and even if it has DPS, it has to be really close to be able to do that DPS reliably, which is really difficult to do when you're trying to DPS things like Crab that are not going to hesitate to shoot you. The Vanilla Nova is built around an idea. It is basically just location spam between the whale and the point sensor and the main weapon never dying and moving around a lot. It's just that that niche involves very little of fighting, and yeah, I mean, weapons kind of need to be able to fight in this game. Having a support weapon that can't really engage at all is a bit of a problem, and Nova just has no tools to be able to do so, and there's no real weapon comps that allow it to be used too much, so unfortunately I don't see this one going anywhere. The Long Rapid's kind of fallen off. I mean, it used to be something you could argue to pick for tower control, and in fact you can still argue it's over Z tier because unlike the other Rapid, it has a special to try to protect you, which could maybe be useful for tower. But let's be real here, Vacuum is not as useful on tower as people are going to think it is, and if you want a Long Rapid, well, you can now pick the other one, which has Whale, which is actually good to get you in. So yeah, the main reason to pick this weapon, which is to have a Rapid Pro, now has the Rapid Pro Deco you can pick instead. A lot of people might be confused as to why Aerospray is here and not in the Z tier, and the main reason is Rainmaker. The main weapon, special weapon, and sub weapon all do good Rainmaker shield damage, so you could argue it could try to do Rainmaker niche things, like Ant did in Splatoon 2 with Starburst. That being said, that weapon was 160p with Curling Rush, which was a mega underrated special that lasted longer than bomb rushes and had pre-patch curling explosions and pains. This is a Reef Slider. I don't think it's as good at doing that. Finally, the most painful weapon to rank. I think this is a new low for Dynamo. I like its kit with it. It actually does have synergy, but the pieces are just kind of weak. Tacticooler doesn't enhance Dynamo as much as it should, mainly because you squid roll off a wall or a squid surge and then you do a vertical flick, and Sprinkler is just kind of weak. The main issue, though, is the main weapon. It's supposed to be threatening with area of effect damage, potential one-shots, and painting capability. It does none of those things well, and it also has vertical flick, and vertical flick does absolutely nothing in this game. It is an attack so slow that you can literally have someone get hit by all three of them at a maximum range and just continue to swim away and not care. Again, this placement hurts. I'm a Dynamo fan. I'm sorry, Dynamo players, but like, the only reason this isn't in Z tier is because you can argue for the weapon's capabilities to do damage over walls and stuff on Humpback and Flounder with extremely impactful map terrain. If you want a cooler, there's an NZAP option. And I might as well even add that Big Swig and Paintbrush are both very similar to this thing, so it has more competition than ever before. Please buff this weapon. Well, with all the bottom tiers out of the way, it's time to talk about a few low tiers to wrap up this video. First up is the Crack-On Roller, and this thing definitely has some potential. Of all the weapons in low tier, this is the one I see most likely to go higher. I do think Roller is actually a pretty solid main weapon right now, and it's something I'll have to talk more about when we get to the vanilla kit because that's where it's most relevant. It's definitely something that can do well if it's able to get in, and cracking with it is pretty nice just for keeping it in as well as giving it a chance to get in if it ever farms this thing when it doesn't have map control. The issue though is that this thing can barely ever get it because it has a beacon, so this weapon struggles like all hell to get in, and its only way to get in takes forever to farm, and it's just a bit too much. I don't really see any map mode where you can super pick this thing and have it feel more worth it. Maybe Flounder is something you could see with how strong beacons are there, but even then, I don't think Kraken is a strong enough special to really carry this kit, and the beacons just synergy-wise don't work on this weapon. It's too short range with too little paint and too little ability to actually pressure people, and that's just unfortunate. So yeah, I'm gonna rank Octobrush this low. It did get some ink efficiency buffs, which are pretty nice, honestly. I do think it makes its Zipcaster and overall uptime a little bit better. It's pretty close to being higher on this list, but honestly, I think it just takes too long to get Zipcaster, and the main weapon's kill time is just kinda weak. Having Paintbrush in the game really showed me just how bad Octobrush's damage is. It's incredibly inconsistent and just struggles to really be able to shark because of it. At higher levels, it's a bit too easy to just trade the thing out, and I think it only really excels in a mode like Clan Blitz. I think there are better Zipcaster options in the game, better weapons with wide hitboxes, and better checks to short range, and especially with Tri-Slosher existing, I think the reasons to pick this are getting low. Still, it's a weapon I can see on Flounder and probably in Clan Blitz a little bit, so it's not all bad. Gold Arrow Spray. You pick this weapon on Humpback Pump Track Splat Zones. You throw the sprinkler, and you paint, and you spam Booyah Bomb like it's Splatoon 2. This is the best weapon for Booyah Spam, and I guess that's what it has. Hydra Splatling is weird because on paper it should just lose to displacement, especially now that you can pick Wiper Deco and missiles are very common. Inkjet is something it can still struggle to deal with the mobility options, though honestly it's not a terrible matchup into it. I could honestly see this weapon for a few super campy maps, especially stuff like Scorch where it can sit on grades to be able to have an easier time against Inkjet, and it does actually bully Ballpoint a little bit at long range, which is nice. That being said, I don't know, I think it's just a little bit too slow. Maybe some Hydra player will go and show me wrong that this could actually be way higher, but for the time being, no one's really tried, and I don't think that's a good sign. We have another Rainmaker niche, but this time much better than Aerospray. This is your cooler Rainmaker niche. Unfortunately, this thing has fallen off a lot because N-Zap is just what you pick in general for cooler, and therefore in Rainmaker as well. But still, if you want beacons in Rainmaker alongside the cooler and high shield DPS, this definitely can do all of that. It struggles to get in really hard, and its kit is something that needs to be made up for by the rest of its comp, but it's not the worst option out there. Still though, I really wish Dapple gets a good kit one day, because it would be really interesting to see what this thing could do when it's freed from the shackles of 5 terrible kits in a row. Yeah, H3D's niche is really to just kind of be a tank with wall and bubble, but the main weapon isn't that threatening because it's kind of weak, and wall and bubble both just still kind of get melted by everything, mainly Crab. I guess if you fight someone who's really overly dependent on missile, the bubble can be kind of nice against that. I could maybe see some dedicated players using it on some flatter maps like Hagglefish Zones, but I think as a whole, it's probably just not worth it for the amount of effort it takes to use it. Okay, so with Junior, I want to talk about weapons that struggle to fight, because I think every weapon needing to be able to fight in situations, especially with more cooler comps in the game, is really important, and weapons that have weaker fighting capabilities are really struggling. In addition to that, this thing farms Big Bubble, which just isn't very good. It at least has the output to make up for it, and Junior can be very annoying with it with bomb spam, but I just don't think it's worth it. So, Tenebrilla is actually pretty solid right now, mainly because they fixed the main weapon so the shield launch actually works, but for the time being, I'll say this is not the kit you want to pick. The only reason it's not lower is because at least Beacon and Vacuum are kind of okay. Like, it is a kit you can build around, and Vacuum alongside the Tent Shield actually has reasons to be picked, as those can stack to make up for the special's flaws quite a decent bit. That being said, is it really worth picking it over the Sorella Tent? Probably not, and we'll talk about Sorella Tent a bit later because I think it is actually quite a relevant weapon. To wrap up the low tiers, we have the Vanilla Rapid. This weapon just doesn't really have a good kit for it. It's fun, don't get me wrong. I think Inkmine can be very nice in terms of a trapping sub that can be really useful for it, but it really struggles to get its special, and it really struggles to poke and get back in to apply ample pressure with its weak damage, and it doesn't have a sub that helps it with that. On top of that, let's keep in mind the main problem with this weapon is it getting rushed down. The special it has prevents you from shooting the gun, and it prevents you from moving. So you have a special that compounds the problems of the main weapon tenfold while giving you a okay special that can maybe apply some displacement and DPS. It's just not that worth it. The other Rapid is way better, so unfortunate V Rapid L here. And that is all the low tiers. Hopefully we see these weapons getting improved in the future. Thanks for watching.